the trend and the way things are going with these models is that they are, in a lot of ways, getting really specifically optimized to write code and produce code. You can imagine if you are an AI lab, that everything that you are building runs on code. And so if you can sort of train your models to be able to write code, that means you can build and build and build faster. So the other reason is that code is in a very unique position of being both a little bit open-ended. There are a lot of different ways you can solve a programming problem, but it's also easily verifiable, right? So you can decide yes or no, was the problem solved? If you're doing something like writing or you're doing something like image generation, if I say, generate me an image of a pelican riding a bicycle, everyone who looks at that image is going to have a different bar for whether that AI did a good job or it solved the problem. With code, it's more like, does it run? Does it pass the automated tests? And does it give us the correct answer?
Hey, agency owners, welcome back to Agency Success. AI can feel like a fire hose. There's something going on every day, every week. It seems like a new update, a new model, a new niche tool for a niche thing I didn't even think about. But today is all about practical agency ready ways to use AI without getting overwhelmed, and particularly for your clients. We've been doing a series of these videos to help you think about and approach AI consulting with your clients. Last time, Rob Howard shared his train, build, integrate framework for approaching doing AI consulting with your clients. Today, Keenan from floorboardai.com shares his crawl, walk, run, fly model. Keenan has been an agency owner himself. Now he works hands-on with agencies to turn cool demos into real client delivery. And he also offers some practical AI coaching so you can stay current without living on social media. Let's dive in. Hey, everybody, welcome back to Agency Success. Got a great expert guest here in today, longtime friend of mine. We've got to connect at a lot of WordCamps and things, and is doing awesome work with agencies and AI. My friend Keenan from floorboardai.com. Keenan, welcome to Agency Success.
Hey there. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Well, let's set the groundwork for a little bit. I know some of what you do, but I'd rather you share it in your own words. What are you doing right today in Floorboard, and how are you, obviously, AI and agency work?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I started Floorboard AI a couple years ago. The sort of release of ChatGPT was a huge moment for me and sort of a wake up call of like, there's this whole new section of technology that I don't know a lot about yet. I previously have worked in agencies, run my own agency for a few years, all in on the WordPress space, like you mentioned. But I realized that there was this major shift change that was kind of starting in our industry. And even though that was, I guess, a little over 3 years ago now, it feels like an eternity ago almost in how fast things are advancing. So I've really just been focused on trying to learn all this new technology, trying to keep up with what's going on in the world of AI and all these advancements, which at times feels impossible. But more importantly, not just kind of going surface level and like putting together a bunch of cool demos, but figuring out how are these tools going to actually enable folks to get real work done and bringing that back to the sort of agency world that I have a lot of previous experience in and kind of trying to merge those two worlds.
That's excellent. Well, I've been geeked out to have this conversation because I know as we talked in the past, you care so much about technology and the work, but really it's the people underneath. And this is a question that's coming up more and more. We've had Rob Howard from Innovating with AI, as you well know, on the Agency Success channel here. And I was excited because I know you've really been focusing all of your efforts on this world and doing some good work. So I'm really eager to dive in and show how agencies can leverage AI as a new technology, just like WordPress, just like, whatever other coding language or thing that's out there. It's an opportunity. Because I think, Keenan, you've been the agency owner, but like, uh, I often joke I'm a geek on TV. I don't know the depth that you do, but friends and family often think I'm the IT guy. But this is another extension that I think agencies can offer services to their clients, show up as a trusted advisor and guide. But what's your perspective on this? What you've seen working with agency owners, working with clients?
Yeah, I think there's two different ways this is kind of going to play out in the agency world. Number one is these are tools that you, as a busy agency owner, I don't actually know any agency owners that aren't constantly busy. You can use these tools to both like help improve the kind of efficiency of the work you're already doing, But what's interesting is we're also seeing people who are able to do new kind of work streams or new things that they just were previously too busy to tackle, or there was too big of a learning curve to tackle. And so they're kind of using those tools internally to help improve kind of the operations and the processes of their agency. And then, like you mentioned, sort of externally, this is also opening up a new sort of, advisory stream for folks. Clients are starting to ask about, what's all this AI stuff? How do I use ChatGPT? And so, just like you might be your client's sort of trusted partner on a tool like WordPress or on their website or, on their SEO budget or anything like that, this has the potential to, once it's a technology that you sort of understand and have a competency in, be a sort of other advisory service and a way that you can deepen relationships with your existing clients as well. So, obviously that requires, you learning the tools and getting mastery of them first. And so that's a lot of what I help folks out with today. But I think this is going to be a thing where, those of us who are on the sort of very cutting edge are seeing all this stuff come down in real time. But as with any technology, there's a sort of diffusion through, the organizational layers of companies and through the economy and all that stuff. And so folks that are kind of starting to pick up on that now will be pretty well positioned to, help when their clients start asking the same sorts of questions to deliver that to them too.
Heck yeah. I mean, I'm sure I know some agency owners like you do that've been in business for 20 plus years. And this thing called WordPress came out and they
Yeah.
shifted because it's the dominant CMS on the planet.
Yep.
But you framed that so well for me. Thank you. Internal and external. Can we start right there with internal?
Sure.
So, what are the ways you see and have worked with agency owners internally to use AI to help with their processes that you talked about? What are some of the biggest opportunities there?
Yeah, absolutely. So I just want to start by saying it's very tempting to like go all the way down the rabbit hole on this stuff and see like someone on social media who's created a, automated pipeline where they generate, 50 Instagram ads a day and are running these on all these different channels. And like, that's a whole huge thing. Be like, I need to do that. And that's pretty overwhelming, quite honestly. And like, I've tried to do that and hit those roadblocks. And so generally what I recommend to folks is a sort of framework that I call, crawl, walk, run, and fly. So that's not unique to me. It's not proprietary. That's been out there in the world. But basically, what that means is sort of when you're just getting started, when you're at the crawl stage, right? That involves figuring out ways that you can use tools that have AI embedded in them and leverage AI, but don't necessarily bring it to the forefront or expect you to kind of be driving it. So a good example of this would be like for operations teams and people running teams and agencies. I really recommend that they start using a tool like Granola, or there are others to transcribe all of your calls. Right, there is a lot of information in those discussions and things that you can kind of break out and use in other ways. But that's just a tool that you install that doesn't require you to open ChatGPT or anything else. It leverages AI sort of under the hood, but it gets you started kind of thinking about, okay, how can we adopt these new tools with this new technology to improve our processes, right? When you're in kind of the walking stage, that's when you're starting to use tools that are still off the shelf, like ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini, and kind of leveraging the power of this new technology. But you're having to prompt it, getting information back, and you're learning along the way, how to use these tools effectively. When you move kind of into the run stage, that's where you take these tools but make them a little bit more personal. So ChatGPT has the concept of custom GPTs, Claude has the concept of projects, Gemini has something similar where you can sort of upload a bunch of information about your specific situation that then that large language model will remember across sessions. So this allows you to have, a project in Claude, for example, that's all about a particular client. So when you go into Claude, it's not just a blank slate AI. It knows sort of what client we're talking about, who we're working with. It knows some of the backstory, the history, all that sort of stuff. So it's a little bit more custom, but you're still not getting into completely customizing anything. You're still using those off-the-shelf tools. And then the fly stage is, okay, you've got all this stuff down. Now we really need to start building tools that are custom for us, or really taking this technology and leveraging it in a very custom way. So an example of that would be, I recently started a new blogging project. And in the past, when I've done these sorts of projects, I get really excited. I publish a bunch of content the first week, and then I completely just stop doing anything with it. And so I built myself what I call like a chief marketing officer agent. And so it has access to my email subscribers in Kit, which is the email platform I use. It has access to my Google Search Console, and it has access to the actual website itself, as well as the sort of plan that I've built for the site. And basically every day it's able to just kind of ping me and say, hey, looks like we got a couple more email subscribers. We're still a ways from our goal. Like, given our content plan, we should probably publish this today. Like, let me know when it's done. I'll mark it done in the log, and like we'll move on. And so that sort of custom tool that I built there has really helped kind of keep me on track with publishing, and more crucially, like promoting the blog post that I published, because it reminds me that, okay, great, you published this post, but like we didn't send out the email about it yet. We didn't do the LinkedIn post about it yet, all that stuff. So there's a whole spectrum of ways that folks can leverage these tools, and I would encourage, like, again, that sort of whole progression to get to the point where I'm building a custom agent to be my CMO has been like a 2 or 3 year progression for me, right? So I don't recommend that, even though all these new tools continue to make it easier and easier to build stuff like that. It is still helpful to kind of have that base level understanding, and start kind of ramping up with these tools a little bit.
Heck yeah. I think two things right there that you shared was really compelling. First is, yes, we use Fathom often for customer interviews and things like that, and
Yep.
dumping that into a project folder for the client. That's such a great. I know Troy Dean at Agency Mavericks has talked about that in the discovery process, but absolutely. And over time, you're getting so much customer data. If you've got client data, if you've got regular calls with them, and being able to put that into an archive. And I even think, like, Keenan, at some point, if you get a bunch of clients in there, you can say, what are the tendencies for your CMO agent? I love that, to be like, what kind of clients am I attracting? What are the parts that break down in our process? There's so much stuff you can do with that, just the
Yeah.
internal operation by recording permission-based, recording client calls and stuff. So that's so good.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that people realize as they start to get into building these tools is the AI piece of everything is one roadblock. Like, you have to learn and understand that to build these things. But very quickly, you also realize that having all of the data that you need to make the tools that you want, and getting that all in the right place, is another sort of hurdle that a lot of folks just haven't even gotten down in their own business. They don't realize how much they're sort of bouncing between all these tools, and so the moment you start thinking in these types of processes, it also helps you sort of clean up, like, okay, great, now we have all of our call transcripts for each of our clients, organized in Google Drive or somewhere else. And that makes the tools you want to build on top of that even easier. But yeah, to your point, you can, if you have 6 months of call transcripts from a client, you can throw those into a tool and ask, okay, like, what, upsell opportunities am I missing here? Or did they sort of identify, a need or a problem that I kind of just skipped over, that maybe we could help provide them a solution for? And so I think that's where these tools are going to become even more powerful, as sort of, not in like a big brother way, but in like a, hey, like, here's kind of the trajectory of how this has been going. What am I missing, or how could I improve? For folks who are doing sales calls, for folks who are just doing client management, all that sort of stuff.
Oh, that's fantastic, and that one builds into Keenan, the CMO agent. That's so smart internally. I love how you're thinking about that, and really, as technologists, we can utilize those activities. But doing the crawl, walk, run, fly, such a good way to position it. So that's internal. Now let's talk external. How do you see agencies working with clients to provide services, consulting, otherwise, to help them really utilize AI? I'm assuming for efficiencies and creativity and some of those, routine things that might come up in a day to day. But what are you seeing from a client perspective?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. So in the same way that, like, when as a WordPress agency owner, right, you say, okay, we're going to help you overhaul your website on WordPress, not because it's the best, website technology ever, but because you have problems, like you need to upload your own images, and like your static website doesn't let you do that, or you need to have multiple people in editing a particular post, and collaborating in that way. And since you don't have a content management system, like, you can't do that. So in the sort of previous space where we would have introduced WordPress as the solution to those problems, I think just having a really good grasp of what all these AI tools and the AI technology can do allows you at a base level to just solve more problems for your clients. So when they mention, like, we really are having this problem where we have to onboard, a new person every week. And yes, we have a checklist, but like, it doesn't really give people access to all their systems and things automatically. And it'd be really great if we could design something for that, right? if you're sort of able to be advisory in that capacity and say, oh, there are actually these workflow building tools that can help do this sort of thing, and that could potentially be sort of a new area for you. But in any sort of client relationship, you want to be the expert, right? As the sort of advisory person, and so all of these new technologies and the sort of new problems that can be solved that are unlocked by this new technology, I see it just as an opportunity for folks to sort of deepen that advisory relationship with their clients and help support, again, like you said, you're seen as the sort of IT guy, and similarly, I've been fixing people's printers since middle school, and with that, sort of comes this understanding that like with all this new technology that comes up, that you're familiar with it and understanding with it, and as your family's default IT guy, that's a different relationship than an agency with their clients, but it's similar in that way. Whereas if you can speak to the technology, it really helps you kind of be seen as the expert and deepen that client relationship and help them solve more problems.
Well, I know a lot of our agency partners here do more things than a typical website development agency, from running their email and different, I would say, classical IT type work. But all that to say is that wide opportunity to continue to be that trusted advisor. What what key use cases and have you seen about how most clients, can use and benefit from AI in the process?
Yeah, I think there's a very even if you're kind of just getting started yourself, like I said, I think there are a lot of folks in like client roles that are even a little bit further behind this kind of adoption curve than folks listening to this are. And so even things as simple as, helping them get into ChatGPT or Claude and showing them, okay, this is not Google where you just, enter a string and you have to look at the websites and come back. This is a slightly different tool. Here's at a basic level, like how large language models work. Here's some tips about how to prompt them better and how to organize like your various work streams into projects and things. So that's why I sort of encourage those first two stages of that crawl and walk framework, is because from what I'm seeing, that's either where clients are now or where they will be in a year or two. And so if you've sort of gone through that as an agency owner and mastered those processes inside of your own agency, that's where you can start to recommend to your clients, like, oh, we did this, it worked really well. I'm seeing that you guys have a similar problem. It would probably work really well for you to transcribe all your calls. Or, we use ChatGPT for this and Claude for this, for these reasons. And here's how to make sure you're using the most powerful model that you can to get the best results instead of just being on the free tier, stuff like that. So there are a lot of lessons that I think I'm able to impart to folks, and they can sort of impart to their clients, but a lot of it really is this weird sort of fuzzy, you kind of have to get in there and use the tools and develop this sort of what I call AI instinct. Because unlike traditional software where, if you go to buy Adobe Photoshop, you go to their pricing page, they'll list all the features out for you. They'll tell you what the software can do, what it can't. These models are very sort of squishy. Like they're good at some things, they're not good at other things, and sometimes the things they're good at seem really hard, and the things they can't do seem really easy for like us as humans, right? And so it's sort of everyone's responsibility as a person in the technology world and someone who's making these recommendations to clients to have that sort of direct experience to figure out, okay, I tried to use this model to generate these 5 images, and it really couldn't do a very good job at that, but it was more than happy to build me an entire web application that uh, it would have taken me weeks to build. We did it in a couple days, right? So the more that they have that direct experience, as their clients sort of come along the same adoption curve that they did, they can be that sort of trusted advisor to them as well.
I think that's an excellent approach, really reoriented me of how do I use it? So if an agency owner is out there using AI, that's a great place. There might be other clients putting together a quick video of how I use it or a blog post or something, sending out to the clients and sharing. These are some use cases I personally use. You mentioned image. That's great. Like, just yesterday I was doing some work here with my video setup, took a screenshot, used, Gemini Nano Banana to like mock up some things. And
Nice.
that could be something just from your personal use cases. You're using it, sharing back with clients. I think that's a brilliant idea. And thank you for sharing that, Keenan, because starting where you are and sharing, this is how I'm using it is that first step. Cause I think of an expert as a couple of steps ahead of the person that wants to be where you are. And what a great idea for agency owners to start where they are. Are you using that? Like you were talking about it. You've used it as a CMO agent. You've used it for these specific things. I was just looking at Claude Cowork, and like my desktop is just not organized at all. I
Yep.
haven't tried it yet. But that's something
Yep.
I could try and share back, particularly like photos and things. But that's something that would probably benefit clients, from an agency. Also staking, I'm out here out front, like you said, bleeding edge, doing this work, showing what can be. And by the way, I offer coaching or consulting services. Okay, that's a great starter and example. Are there other use cases specifically you've seen agencies or clients using AI, and how you work with those particular clients that might stand out to you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest one that we haven't kind of talked about yet is coding, quite honestly. Like the trend and the way things are going with these models is that they are in a lot of ways getting really specifically optimized to write code and produce code. There are a lot of reasons for that we don't have to go into, but largely you can imagine if you are an AI lab that everything that you are building runs on code. And so if you can sort of train your models to be able to write code, that means you can build and build and build faster. So that's one of the main reasons. But the other reason is that code is in a very unique position of being both a little bit open-ended. There are a lot of different ways you can solve a programming problem, but it's also easily verifiable, right? So you can decide yes or no, was the problem solved? If you're doing something like writing or you're doing something like image generation, if I say, generate me an image of a pelican riding a bicycle, uh, everyone who looks at that image is going to have a different bar for whether that AI did a good job or it solved the problem. With code, it's more like, does it run? Does it pass the automated tests? And does it give us the correct answer? So it's in a very unique position where it's both a little bit creative and complicated, but also the output is verifiable. So these models are getting really, really good at writing code. And so I think a lot of folks, over winter break, especially, there was a moment where Anthropic released a brand new model that was even better at coding. And so I and a bunch of other folks have been using this tool called Claude Code to basically do a lot of the coding work that I would previously have done by hand. And like I mentioned before, it's also taken a bunch of projects that I just sort of had sitting up on the shelf as like, maybe those will be nice to do someday. And now it's like, nope, I can, spend a day working on this and get a really, polished output and something that is ready to go out into the world. So what I recommend folks doing is there is a pretty big learning curve with these tools. Again, you have to sort of know how to prompt them. You have to know how to work back and forth with them and verify their output. But especially if you are an agency where you're writing a lot of code, just try to take like one ticket per sprint that is pretty, well defined. It's well scoped. There's all the information to sort of on the ticket and say, great, Claude Code is my tool of choice, but Gemini has a coding assistant as well. OpenAI has Codex. There are a bunch of these out there, and just kind of see, okay, can I, without opening my code editor, use this tool and like sort of coach it through solving the problem. And as you do that, you can also sort of have these tools learn your preferences as well. So if you say, okay, you used a new function for each little piece of functionality, whereas I would have written it a little bit more concisely, you can sort of teach those preferences to it over time. And what I've seen is, again, if like the first time you do this, you will say, well, I could have done that ticket in 30 minutes and it took me 2 hours to get this assistant to do this for me because I couldn't just like edit the code myself. But then slowly your brain starts to zoom out and you think about, okay, I really need to think about now, what is the spec for this feature? How does it fit into the broader system? Like, is there any client context that, the base AI just won't have because it doesn't know my client that I can provide to it? And if you start to think of it as, okay, now I have this really smart developer on my team that knows how to write a ton of code, knows about all these coding patterns that maybe I never learned about, but doesn't have context on what we're building, who the client is, and how it needs to work. That's when you start to really work in that sort of pairing and can build a lot of really cool things.
That's awesome. As you're talking, my mind just goes to like 50 different thoughts, of
Yep.
what you can do. One of the things I love to do is just put a bunch of data. You mentioned earlier, like your Google Search Console and your Google Analytics is locked in. I'm curious, this is a broad question, so go with it, answer it the way you think, but
Sure.
Ways to use specifically AI in WordPress. Now, I'm going to say WordPress not just as a software project and all that kind of stuff and runs your website, but just broadly things that you see AI and WordPress for websites and all that being used.
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think there's a couple different ways that I've been using it on some of my projects that are WordPress. So number one, it's really good at debugging, right? So if you've got error messages throwing, if you've got stuff in your error logs that's coming up weird, what I do is I just like screenshot my entire plugins screen. I screenshot the version of WordPress and the theme I'm using and all that, and I just paste in the error logs and say, hey, here's the whole setup. Like, what do you think? Especially with these coding tools, if you are running your WordPress site locally, the nice thing is it can actually like dive into the code for all your plugins and look through stuff and find, okay, here's where I think it is. Like, let's look at the code. Is that actually what's happening? Can we test it? That sort of stuff. And so it's really great as a partner for like, I'm just getting this weird error. I actually used this the other day with somebody that I work with. Um, she realized that when she enabled a certain plugin, a piece of JavaScript wasn't loading. And I was like, okay, well, like in my experience, that means there's probably a conflict between some JavaScript the plugins loading and some JavaScript the themes loading and whatever. And so we took one of these coding tools and we said, hey, here's the problem. When I enable this plugin and this theme together, it breaks. Here's exactly what's breaking. Here's what the good state looks like. Um, what do you think? And it basically spent 5 minutes kind of looking through the plugin, looking through the theme, looking through all the customizations she had made. And it said, well, yeah, here's the problem. These two scripts are getting, added to the site at the same time. They're conflicting. It was a jQuery issue, which it seems like it always is. And so you can't load two versions of the same thing. So just wait to load this one and it'll be all set. And again, like I do think that given my experience and hers combined, like we would have been able to find that, but we would have been on Zoom 3 hours at least. This was essentially a sort of 30-minute back and forth debugging where there were a couple times where we had to say, well, no, we forgot to give you this piece of information. Like probably don't look over there. We don't think it's that. But it was able to get to the end, and that was it. It gave us the fix, and we implemented it, and it went live that night, which was great because this was a site that was like actively in the process of launching as we were finding this bug, so it was pretty critical. Another thing that I've seen folks use it for a lot is analyzing their page speed report from Google. So if you throw your site into Google PageSpeed, it'll come back with a bunch of recommendations that says, oh, we should, cache these images, or we should, load the fonts like out of the blocking flow of the page so that we don't block the page just to load the fonts. And particularly like if you are less technical, a lot of those recommendations are very technical, and it's hard to go from that recommendation to a fix on your site. And there are lots of plugins that help make that easier, but that's a thing that I've used where I've just said, hey, like here's the report, here are the errors that it's seeing. Walk me through one by one how we fix these, whether that's installing a plugin, whether that's having it write a little bit of code that I can drop into the site, anything like that, kind of whatever technical level the person is at. That's another use case that I've seen. So just things that you have a pretty good grasp on how you might do yourself, but they would just take you quite a long time. Those are the sort of immediate speed ups there. And then you could obviously go further into, taking a sort of vague functionality and having it build you a custom plugin or stuff like that. But those are the sort of low hanging fruit that I've seen.
The debug stuff, taking a screenshot of your plugins and just saying, hey, what might this be? That's really killer. I haven't thought of that, but there's so much data and reports and things on the back end that WordPress does, that these other tools do, that you could just blindly almost throw in and say, what are you seeing?
Yep.
And I think having a good aim and goal, I'm trying to increase something, and then what are you seeing? Those are great ideas. But the debugging, that's pretty brilliant for sure. Leveraging it, to me, it's all about efficiency. It's a
Hmm.
tool. The computer was a tool, is a
Yep.
tool.
Yep.
AI is just another tool to help in all this to make our lives better and easier,
Yeah.
hopefully.
Yeah, and I think for me, another thing is that, a lot, especially with newer agency owners who are taking on a lot of different projects as they're just trying to get up and off the ground, there's a ton of context switching. And like in that example, if a client, emails you and says, hey, there's this error that I'm seeing on the site, like what's going on? If it's a site you haven't worked on in a week and like you have to get your local environment spun up and all of that, there's a huge amount of like context switching there where if you have your AI assistant sort of already primed to help you with that sort of thing, it already has the context from your last session. It knows exactly where you left off. It knows all the plugins. It knows all that stuff. So I see it too, sort of enabling agencies to take on projects like that that maybe would have been impossible for them to take on in the past or impossible for them to manage. But once they start sort of codifying the rules and guidelines and everything about each project into these tools, um, it makes it much more like you have sort of a dedicated like project manager or something on these projects that previously would not have been able to have that due to cost reasons or just efficiency reasons.
That's so good. Well, I want to quickly touch on some of the tools, and I'm going to make a big disclaimer here, Keenan, for you, because I know this is going to change. But today,
Sure.
as we're recording this in February 2026, what tools are you seeing out there and their maybe strength? We've mentioned like Gemini and Nano Banana, but could you just give us a real quick kind of summary of where you see the strengths of the current tools are out
For sure.
there? And
Yeah,
maybe even
absolutely.
add in one, which is the crazy one you're experimenting with.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so I will say that generally I use Claude for most of my AI work. So that's Claude.ai, which is on the web. If it's anything on my computer, I use Claude Code. I think Anthropic has sort of seen that Claude Code was maybe a mistaken name because it's great at doing a bunch of other stuff besides code. So I use that pretty frequently. And like you mentioned, they also have Claude Code in their desktop app. They also have Claude Cowork, which is another sort of variation of that. But I'm pretty deep in the sort of Anthropic ecosystem these days. I think the models that they release, to me, have the best combination of like capability and also, put it in air quotes, but personality in terms of what their output looks like. I do have Gemini and ChatGPT subscriptions as well, and I will use those if I feel like I'm kind of hitting a dead end with Claude. I will bounce to one of the other models, but generally I use Claude for most of that work there. On the image side, yeah, absolutely. Nano Banana is sort of my go-to for everything there. I've used it to generate, hero images for blog posts on a random little side project I was working on. I've used it as a very powerful image editing tool. So I was doing a video the other day where it was a fake ad where Dr. Frankenstein's monster was giving a testimonial, and I wanted to spin the camera around a little bit, and so I was able to use Nano Banana for those sorts of things, which I don't actually know how I would have done that in a pre AI world. So highly recommend there as a really solid image generation model. And then Google's VO model as well for video stuff. So if I've generated kind of look and feel storyboard things in Nano Banana, like sort of getting them animated and moving in VO is something I've really done as well. And then I've also been using Suno on the music side. So it's been interesting to me. My first year in college, I was a music composition major, and music has been a thing my whole life. And so it's been interesting to me to see kind of how those models come along and how they work. And so yeah, those are kind of the main stack that I sit with, I would say. Um, a sort of out there tool that I've been using, I think really what that's looked like for me is experimenting with a lot of this OpenClaw stuff that's been out there. So, for folks that don't know, basically, so this guy created essentially a personal assistant AI that instead of going to a web browser or opening your terminal on your computer, you basically just chat with through whatever messaging platform you would choose. So Telegram or WhatsApp or iMessage, or you could give it access to its own email, and things like that. And so I've really been messing with that. I think the reason it's still sort of a bleeding edge type of thing for me is that it consumes a ton of tokens. I've had to figure out like how to like budget how I'm using it. And I think there's also the open question of like, are we really comfortable connecting this to all of our like tools that we use day to day? So I've tried to mitigate that by, for example, giving it its own GitHub account, its own one password vault and stuff like that. So it has its own sort of self-contained ecosystem, but striking the balance of giving it memory that's useful but not overwhelming, keeping the costs in check, and giving it access to tools that are useful is still a little bit of a balancing act there. But I did spend about an hour sort of walking it through the website for my gym and how that works. And so now it can sort of make scheduling changes on my behalf, which is great because I can just message it and say, hey, like we need to cancel tomorrow's session, reschedule it for Thursday, and it knows sort of all my preferences there and can do that sort of browser automation piece for me. So it doesn't always work, which is why I don't officially recommend it as like a tool that folks run out and adopt. It requires you to have somewhat of an understanding of a lot of these underlying principles that we talked about. But that's kind of my stack these days.
That's so cool. I've written those down to go look because I hadn't heard of Suno. I had heard of OpenClaw, but now we've given some Cool things to go investigate.
Yeah.
Um, let's talk about you and your work at Floorboard. We were talking before we started recording. I'm really eager to get into that and see what services you're offering, what resonates with the people that you work with, and I just want to talk about what you're excited for in the work you're doing with all the stuff we're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there's a couple different buckets that I sort of uh, get grouped into depending on where folks are at and what they need. I think a large portion of what I do, especially with folks who are very early to all of this, is essentially just very focused like training. And you can obviously, go on YouTube and watch a video about Claude Code, or you can go and see here's how to use, a custom GPT or a Claude project for that sort of stuff. But what I sort of really do is if there's a pretty big problem that's persistent across your whole company, um, I can sort of tailor trainings to that sort of problem and help, upskill your whole team on, okay, here's how you actually like package all of your client information into a cloud project so that it has that persistent memory. Or we do a lot of image work and we're not going to use this tool for like our final client output, but can we use Nano Banana to generate sort of a mood board or just initial kind of prototyping ideas around a concept that we might put into production for a client? And so I think there's a lot of folks who are just looking for that sort of 0 to 1, like just give me all of the knowledge and I'll figure out how to apply it or how to use it. But I just need that shortcut of like all these tools are out there. I need to know how to get somewhat competent in them and proficient in them. So whether that's just an hour long sort of workshop, or that's a more like a hands-on lab where we're actually having folks build stuff, that to me is sort of what's really exciting is seeing folks sort of learn about something and then immediately be able to apply it. Because again, you could buy all the courses you want, you can watch all the YouTube videos you want. If you're not sort of actually using these tools in some way, I think you're not sort of getting the most out of them. So that's one angle. The thing that's been more popular lately and something that I've been doing for a couple folks is basically um, being a sort of AI tutor that's available to them. So especially folks who are running agencies, I think a lot of them are grappling with this problem right now of how do I figure these things out fast enough or stay ahead of the curve enough that I can help, bring my employees along or bring my clients along. And so what I do for those folks who just want to kind of a little bit of help like staying up on these things is I get on a call with them either once or twice a month, and we talk through either a problem that they're bringing to me that says, here's the thing where I'm stuck, I think I could apply AI here, like what would you recommend, how would you solve this? Or if they don't have anything that's pressing, I'll just jump on it and kind of like what I just do with you, I'll say, hey, here's a tool that I've been using recently, here's a couple ways that I'm using it, sort of just inspiration, keeping on the cutting edge. And so instead of them, browsing Twitter and being in all these random Discord servers and trying to keep up with every announcement from all the AI labs, I'm sort of that layer that's taking all of that and synthesizing it down to say, I know what you're working on. You can either bring me stuff you're struggling with, or I'll just show you some cool stuff that I think could really up level what you're doing. So that's sort of more like one-on-one, and then being available between those calls in Slack as well. And there's a lot of folks who are just like in group chats and things with other people who are trying AI, and there are a lot of folks who aren't. And so I see that if you want someone to kind of be able to bounce ideas off of and leverage my expertise in that way, I work with some folks that way too.
I think that's a great way to get started too. Like you just want someone that like I've been doing here. You've been doing it with me is I'm curious about this thing. I'm curious about, you know, Claude co-work and to have someone like you that's in these tools, swimming in these tools all day, every day on the bleeding edge of things. I think that's such an incredible way for a client to get started. So make sure you go to floorboardai.com and hit that message button and start talking to Keenan, because I think I've known him for a long time and he's really good at what he does. And you can obviously care about everything. He cares about everything. You can hear that in all the things you're talking about. Keenan, what are you excited about? What you're doing, what's happening in the world and all this stuff next?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a little bit hard to say. It feels like every day when I open my computer and read the sort of news and what's going on, there's something new to be excited about and interested in. And so I think I'm excited to see, as these like models get more powerful and things like that, what sort of new use cases are unlocked, right? I think there is a lot of sort of latent creativity in the world in some ways. Folks who have all these ideas and have sort of been bottlenecked by what they could execute on. And I think that the biggest thing for me is that as these models get more powerful and more capable, there are just a lot of things that we can build, and new things that we can create, and experiences that just weren't in the world before. Um, and I think at the beginning of any sort of technology revolution, like that's the thing that I am the most excited about. But I also think that at least for me, it's also important to just be really practical about these sorts of things and say like, great, I'm not, if you want someone to listen to and follow who's just like insanely hyping up every new thing that comes out of all these labs, like that's not me. I'm not your guy for that. I'm very focused on like, cool, this tool seems cool. Here's what it can do and what's really great about it. Here are the couple things where, it kind of fell down and didn't do what I expected it to, or needed it to do. And we'll try again on the next, the next model release, and see if it's gotten there. So I just think it's a really interesting time to be experimenting with these things. And like I said, I'm seeing myself personally that I've always had this whole backlog of ideas that I just said, oh, okay, I'll get to that someday when I'm, between jobs, or when I'm on winter break or something. And realistically, like that's just not going to happen. And so with these tools now, it just really like completely unlocks sort of what a lot of people can build. And so I do think we'll see a lot of folks who previously, couldn't code, or didn't know how to do image editing in Photoshop, or weren't, songwriters, right? Come out with a lot of really, really cool things. And I'm excited to see where that all goes.
Well, Keenan from floorboardai.com, thank you so much for sharing all this. I know there's a list of things I want to come back and invite you back into the agency success community, but I appreciate you today sharing your experiences, these really practical, simple ways that make it approachable for an agency and their clients to start leveraging this really great tool that's helping, and it's just getting better every single day and exponentially. But I appreciate you coming on to the agency success community, and thank you.
Thanks so much. Happy to be back anytime.